Hello and welcome to Stand Up, the show that covers everything that happened yesterday and helps you understand what's happening today. Joining me today, it's Wajahat Ali. He's one of our all-time favorites. He's awesome. As always, that is coming up at about 28 minutes if you want to skip the news and jump right to the conversation. Hard to believe that we are just 1 week away from PODJAM and 1 week away from you not having to hear me talk about PODJAM, which you either have FOMO that you can't go, or you're just sick of repetitive promotion, which can be a thing as well. Either way, I'm so excited to see those of you that are going to join us out in Vegas. If you want to hang out in Thousand Oaks on March 22nd, that's in Southern California, Desiree and Amanda are throwing a little soiree, a little barbecue, starting at 3, going to whenever. There's an Evite out there. We can confirm you're a real person and not a bad person. You're part of our community. We would love to have you. So if you're in Southern California on the 22nd of March, hope to see you there, and hope to see you tonight at our final hangout before I get on a plane and head out to the West Coast for the West Coast Swing. Tonight, 8 p.m. I won't be there long because I've got to get up early for a flight, so I hope to see you there. All right, well, I've got your news, headlines, and your clips coming up right now. Can't do any of it without your support. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Welcome to new subscribers, a few new subscribers this week, and I'm very, very excited to welcome all of you. I've heard from a few of you, and it's awesome to have you. So thank you very much for joining up, and hope to see you at tonight's hangout. Now let's get to the headlines that I put together for you today. Well, let's start with our petty dictator's announcement yesterday that the administration will be suspending about $175 million in federal funding to the University of Pennsylvania. Remember, they did this to Columbia last week, $400 million. But now another Ivy League school, University of Pennsylvania, Trump's alma mater, by the way. I don't know how he possibly got in there. But this is because of its approach to transgender athletes, apparently. A person familiar with the decision cited the university's past embrace of a transgender woman as a member of its women's swim team. University of Pennsylvania said it had been and remained in full compliance with the regulations. It's now the second Ivy League university 2 weeks to be explicitly targeted by the petty dictator. The $400 million in funding, by the way, that they withdrew from Columbia University has imperiled the school's medical research, which is vitally important. So more terrible news there. And let's get to the Federal Reserve. Yesterday, the chairman, Jerome Powell, made an announcement. Federal Reserve said it was leaving interest rates unchanged, but warned of rising uncertainty about the direction of the economy. In part, guess why? Due to our tyrant's tariff agenda. That's right. The Fed said its key federal fund rates, which serves as a benchmark for interest rates, would remain at approximately 4.5%. I've got some audio from Jerome Powell coming up for you on that. Also yesterday, Schittler announced that the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, said on a phone call, Ukraine has agreed to move forward with a partial ceasefire with Russia, which Trump and Russian Vladimir president, his other dad, had discussed just a day earlier. So we'll see what happens with that. That is moving day to day, obviously. And all is not well in Turkey, where they arrested the top rival of their autocratic authoritarian leader, Erdogan, on accusations of corruption and terrorism, which probably aren't true. This is yesterday, days before he was set to be named the opposition's candidate in the next presidential election. The opposition blasted the arrest of the rival, Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu of Istanbul, as politically motivated, and said that the government was trying to remove a potential political threat to Erdogan. Sound familiar? And a striking ruling from a federal judge Tuesday, of course, blocked Trump's executive order banning transgender people from enlisting or serving in the military. U.S. District Judge Ana Reyes of Washington, D.C. ruled that the ban violates the Equal Protection Clause because it discriminates based on transgender status and sex. So that's a really important ruling. We'll see where that goes. And in the latest of series of unfortunate elections have consequences moments, Steve Bannon writes at Maddow blog, the Department of Health and Human Services recently removed a former Surgeon General's warning declaring gun violence a public health crisis to comply with the president's executive order to protect the Second Amendment. Wait, what? Gun violence is no longer a public health crisis. It's the leading cause of death of children and adolescents in the United States. but no longer, okay, I'm going to have to take a minute there, as I'm sure you are hearing it. Wow. And this one is pretty breathtaking as well. Did you hear about yesterday the story of Jackie Robinson, who broke the color barrier in Major League Baseball after serving as a second lieutenant in the United States Army, no longer exists on the Department of Defense's website as part of the Trump administration's wiping out of diversity, equity, and inclusion within the federal government? Really? I mean, Jackie Robinson is DEI? If the argument is that your achievement should be based on merit, is Jackie Robinson not the greatest example of the meritocracy one could ever cite? Yet now he is DEI. It's just audaciously breathtaking, as I have to say always. And did you hear about this Minnesota state senator facing calls now to resign? He hasn't resigned yet after he was arrested and accused of arranging to solicit a teenage girl for prostitution. His name is Justin Eichhorn. He's Republican. He was talking to a 17-year-old girl who he arranged a meetup with at a suburb in Minneapolis, but he was actually communicating with an undercover detective. It's unclear whether he had retained an attorney, and his Senate office did not immediately respond to requests for comment. But he'd recently gained notoriety for proposing a bill that would recognize Trump derangement syndrome as a form of mental illness. He's got bigger problems now, though. Bye-bye, Justin Eichhorn. Have a good life. And in Israel, the military sent ground troops back into Gaza on Wednesday. The spokesman for the IDF announced just a day over it broke a 2-month ceasefire with a sprawling bombing campaign that killed hundreds across the tiny enclave. The targeted ground operation is what they're calling it, is focused on the central and southern Gaza Strip over the past 24 hours. It is horrific, actually, what's gone on there over the last couple of days. And speaking of horrific, in Texas and New Mexico, new measles cases. The outbreak has passed 300 cases, surpassing the total number of cases in our country all of last year. And what is our Health and Human Services director doing? Nothing. Nothing at all. He's hiding. You would think he'd be having a press conference every day about that and bird flu, but he's not. He's the worst, of course, as you know. And his uncle, JFK, there's news on that because there's newly released documents or files shedding light on American spycraft, apparently, but nothing new on Kennedy's assassination. So if there is anything new, I'm happy to talk about it. Probably something to bring up at the Hangout. They did release these unredacted files, and apparently there's social security numbers of people that are still alive in them. It was recklessly done, as is everything that they're doing right now. The Justice Department also plans to unseal FBI surveillance records on Martin Luther King Jr. about 2 years before their court-ordered release. So we'll see what happens there. The administration appointed 2 officials who helped dismantle USAID to run the USAID. So that makes a lot of sense. They also are considering scaling back their HIV prevention efforts, which is horrible. And a judge temporarily stopped the EPA from clawing back $14 billion in climate grants, which is bad news. We have to keep hearing this phrase, clawing back. It's pretty weird. Money has already been spent or dedicated to an agency or to a state government, and then they could somehow take it back. That's hard to understand. The Trump administration also quietly lifting a ban on U.S. imports from a sugar company that had been accused of forced labor. I mean, it's hard to believe some of this stuff, but this is our cartoon villain leadership now. Anything that's really bad for you is okay. Sugar, guns, measles, it doesn't really matter. And Donald Trump Jr. visited Serbia and backed its embattled autocratic leader, of course, because, they got apparently a Trump hotel project there. So that makes sense. All right. Those are the headlines that I've gathered for you from yesterday. Now it's time to get to the clip show. What have I got for you in audio? Well, I think these first 4 clips all deal with the president's illegal order to deport whoever he wants, basically. In this case, it was Venezuelan gang members. They started there because the strategy is that any of us who argue that that's wrong are saying that gang members should be allowed to stay in America, that criminals should be allowed. No, everybody's obviously saying, no, they got to get a trial. You can't just decide that someone is a criminal because of their tattoos or their social media posts. So that could be any of us. But it is a huge controversy. It's a huge scandal. And let's start with the despicable Greg Gutfeld, who yesterday on Fox News' The Five exploded with this terrible outburst, just showing you how far the right wing has slid towards autocracy.
Our chief legal analyst, Greg Gutfeld.
Oh, yes. Well, I'm glad you asked me that question. Look, John Roberts says it's not appropriate. It's not an appropriate response to when you disagree with a judge. And it is really a surprise to me that Trump doesn't follow the appropriate protocol when there are rapists and murderers invading our country. Maybe a guy in a robe in D.C. can follow all the protocols, but Trump is the effing president of the United States who protects 300 million plus people. He is a leader who does not have the luxury of opening up his little books to read, oh, my God, maybe he didn't do it the right way. Roberts, shut the F up. This is something that a president has to do. He has to do this.
So that is one of the most famous and most influential commentators in all of television. And there he is. There he is saying that. Heather Cox Richardson writes, Gutfeld's outburst shows just how far today's right wing has slid toward autocracy. It's a grim marker for our democracy when a commentator with a wide audience openly calls for the replacement of the rule of law with a dictator. She goes on to say, while Trump apologists are insisting that the men deported to El Salvador are part of a Venezuelan gang that has spread crime across the United States, the family members of some of the individuals who show up on videos of those deported insist their relatives are not gang members. So there is a lot to talk about with that. Here is ABC News' Rachel Scott in the White House press briefing yesterday asking a question to Trump's press secretary, Caroline Leavitt.
Back to those deportation flights to El Salvador, can the administration provide any more details on how authorities determined that each of those men were in fact members of a gang? And if the White House can publish images, photos, videos of those men, why can't the administration just release basic information like their identities and names?
We are not going to reveal operational details about a counterterrorism operation, but what I can assure you, as I said on Monday, we have the highest degree of confidence in our ICE agents and our Customs and Border Patrol agents who have committed their lives to targeting illegal criminals in our country, particularly foreign terrorists, and they had great evidence and indication. They have the highest degree of professionalism, and they were 100% confident in the individuals that were sent home on these flights and in the president's executive authority to do that.
Follow up, I know in the last briefing you cited privacy concerns as a reason why the administration may not be able to reveal the identities. What exactly are the privacy rights of immigrants who were deported that the administration says were dangerous enough to be sent to El Salvador and sit in a prison?
Again, as I just said, we're not going to reveal the operational details of a counterterrorism operation for quite obvious reasons. We're trying to combat terrorism here in the United States of America. Jack.
Okay, so gang members are now terrorists, and they are 100% positive that they're all guilty. That's where we're at right now, and it is terrifying, to be clear and to say the least. And a lot of folks are obviously talking about that. Here now is two Republican congressmen being asked about it on television, first on CNN. Let's go to the despicable Jim Jordan. In case you weren't paying attention, the judge halted the deportations. Trump then the next day said that judge is all kinds of terrible and he should be impeached. And now Republican congressmen and others are having to defend the president's middle of the night tirade about impeaching a sitting judge, which of course John Roberts put out the statement opposing lightly. But now I guess the talking point from the despicable Jim Jordan and others is the judge made a political decision and therefore he should be impeached because he defines a political decision as a high crime and misdemeanor, apparently.
Done that you believe is an impeachable offense under the constitutional description of high crimes and misdemeanors.
All I'm saying is if you're acting in a political fashion and not just, following the law, ruling on the law, and I would argue that, frankly, just his ruling in and of itself, remember, the Constitution is pretty clear. Article 2, Section 1, very first sentence says, power in the executive branch shall be vested in a president of the United States. The president has the authority.
Now, he doesn't have the authority. This is just so dumb. This is such a dumb argument that we're having to deal with. It's so anti-American and obviously not constitutional. It's an easy decision for the judge, I think, from what I'm hearing, but didn't stop Brendan Gill, where even the crazy right-wing Newsmax anchor had to ask the question to this Republican representative who was also a Trump sycophant named Brendan Gill.
I have to ask you this. For impeachment, obviously, you have to have high crimes, misdemeanors. What crime did the judge commit?
This is for usurping the executive's authority, for demeaning the impartiality of the court by making a politicized ruling and forcing a constitutional crisis. That is a high crime and misdemeanor.
Congressman Brendan Gill sharing that with us today. We do appreciate the time.
All right, there you go. So now what matters is what Elie Mystal thinks. How about that? Let's go to Amy Goodman. Democracy Now! Yesterday had our friend Elie Mystal, the justice correspondent of The Nation magazine, on to take this on.
Elie, thanks for coming back to Democracy Now! What is happening right now with this presidential attack on judges?
We live in a fascist dictatorship. That's what's happening right now. That's what it feels like. This is where we are. There's not a coming constitutional crisis. We are in the constitutional crisis right now. Because what do we have? How can we call ourselves a democracy? How can we call ourselves a nation of laws if one man and one man alone, Donald Trump, is able to defy the other two branches of government? And that's what we have here. And that's what Trump is promised to do, and that's what he is, in fact, doing. Amy, you played the clip. You mentioned John Roberts' statement, and you rightly pointed out that it is rare for John Roberts to say anything at all. But let's look at what the man said, and let's look at what the man didn't say, right? It was one of the weakest statements that he could have possibly made. He's running around with his, clutching his pearls over like, don't impeach federal judges. That's wrong. He didn't say nothing about actually following the orders given by those federal judges that Roberts doesn't want impeached, right? He didn't say anything about Trump's blatant violation of multiple federal court orders. He didn't say anything about that at all. So again, Roberts is not your friend. Roberts is not the one coming to help us. He's as afraid as I believe that Roberts is as afraid of Trump as the rest of the government is. And that's, again, I don't know any definition of fascist dictatorship other than the one we are all experiencing right now.
Yeah. Well said, Elie. And it's hard to hear, but I think that analysis is pretty good. What do you think? Would love to know. All right, now let's go from the courts to the economy. I thought this was an interesting interview. Mark Zandi is one of the most respected economists in the world of mainstream economics. And even Mark Zandi is saying that we're headed towards recession, potentially, and it's self-inflicted. Here he is on CNN yesterday.
Look, the recession risks are uncomfortably high and they're rising. I think they're less than 50-50, but it really does depend on the president and what he does here. I think if he continues to push on the tariffs, like, for example, right now, there's a lot of talk about reciprocal tariffs. That's broad-based tariffs coming into effect in a couple of weeks, I think, early April. If that actually happens and those tariffs stay in place for any length of time, couple, 3, 4, 5 months, I think that's enough to push the economy into recession, given everything else that's going on. So, this would be a really weird recession, right? I mean, it's recession by design. The economy came into the year rip-roaring, exceptionally strong, and we're pushing it in because of policy. It just doesn't feel like, that's the direction we need to go. So I suspect the president and the administration at some point will say, okay, enough already. But I don't see that with confidence, and those recession risks are high.
Yeah, what do you think it would take to get to that point? I mean, do we see, will it require a significant weakening in the labor market? I mean, what do you think it will take to sort of shift policy, at least from the White House?
Well, let me say, I don't think it take a lot, right? Because confidence is very fragile. You can see it in the consumer sentiment surveys. You can see it among business people, all the surveys of businesses and their capital spending plans, the investments they plan to make, they're all pulling back. You can see it obviously in the stock market, investor sentiment. So, I think the collective psyche is very, very fragile, and it wouldn't take a lot to push it in at this point. So, if the tariffs actually are put into place, if we see big cuts to government funding in a very short period of time, if there's significant mass deportation that disrupts labor markets, many parts of the economy depend on immigrant labor, construction, manufacturing. That might be enough to push the collective psyche over the edge and push us into recession. Because at the end of the day, Rahel, recession is a loss of faith. We lose faith that we're going to be able to hold on to our job and businesses are going to be able to sell what they produce.
Well, there you go, right from Mark Zandi. And now let's head to the chairman of the Fed, who had a press conference announcing that interest rates would stay the same for right now. This is yesterday, and he was being asked by a reporter who goes off mic for just a second, though, about the tariffs' role here. And so this is a very calm. It's always one of these. The Treasury Secretary is always these boring, anodyne press conferences and questions, monotone in nature, but don't let that fool you. What he's saying, I think, is pretty important, that tariffs absolutely will impact inflation.
How much of the higher inflation forecast for this year is due to tariffs? And since the policy path remains the same, are you effectively reading this as a one-time price level shock?
Okay, so how much of it is tariffs? So let me say that it is going to be very difficult to have a precise assessment of how much of inflation is coming from tariffs and from other, and that's already the case. You may have seen that goods inflation moved up pretty significantly in the first 2 months of the year. Trying to track that back to actual tariff increases, given what was tariffed and what was not, very, very challenging. So some of it, the answer is clearly some of it. A good part of it is coming from tariffs, but we'll be working, and so will other forecasters, to try to find the best possible way to separate non-tariff inflation from tariff inflation.
All right, there you go. That's Jerome Powell yesterday at the Fed. Exciting stuff. And that should be big news coming from him. And also our friend Martha Burns out in Kentucky texted me yesterday and said, hey, you should play Andy Bashir, who she heard on the Midas Touch show. So here he is on tariffs. We always like to hear from the Kentucky governor. We like him, right?
In seriousness, this is the Trump tax day, or the super inflation day. Tariffs, especially on Canada, lead to increases in the price of gas. How much they lead to that increase is the Trump tax. You're paying it solely because of the president. Tariffs on places like Mexico increase the price of groceries, which are already too high. The extra amount you pay is the Trump tax. The tariff on lumber that's out there is going to increase the price of new homes that are already so tough for that couple trying to buy their first home. That increase in price is the Trump tax. And I don't say that because I'm a Democratic governor and he's a Republican president. I say it because it's solely his fault. Every economist is saying, don't do it. It's slowing down our economy. It could lead us into a recession. You inherited an economy that was growing more than most in the world, and you're tanking it. You're wrecking it. And people in my state are going to pay more than most because our number one export target is Canada. And so whether it's Kentucky bourbon or our aerospace exports, we get hit, and we get hit hard.
All right. Wow. There you go. That's one more clip that I wanted to share with you. I've been very interested in this conversation around Democratic leadership, specifically what happened with the vote from the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer leading the way with several other Democrats, I think 10 in total, voting for this. I do not think it's as cut and dry as a lot of folks think it is. And I have been watching and listening to almost everything that Chuck Schumer said everywhere he went, from CBS this morning, the news show on CBS, the early morning news show, the early show, for God's sake, I couldn't think of it, and as well as The View. And then he went on Chris Hayes now twice. But I thought this clip from his long conversation, which I think was on All In on Chris Hayes 2 nights ago, really worth listening to the whole conversation. I think Chris does a masterclass interviewing him, giving him enough rope there to hang himself by his own words. But I thought this was the key part of it. So I wanted to share it with you because Hayes and so many others are trying to say, this is different. This is a 5-alarm fire, constitutional crisis. Democracy is in danger or done, and we can't act normally.
what I'm saying is that all of those things you enumerated, which all sound like good politics to me, are the kinds of things that you'd be doing if Mitt Romney were president. That, like, there's this weird asymmetry right now, which is that they are acting in this totally new way, in which they are ambitiously trying to seize all power and create a presidential dictatorship in the United States of America, and the Democratic opposition is acting like, well, if we can get their approval rate down a few points, then what? What happens?
Well, what happens is, look, first, we get it way down. He's going to have much less. This worked in 2017. You say now it's a different government.
It's different, though.
Oh, it is different.
My God.
But health care, we beat him. Taxes, we beat him. And guess what we did? Guess what we did, Chris? We took back the House and won in the Senate, and then we were allowed to do all those good things. This is not the only tactic. We have to stand strong in certain instances and not give them the votes at all. But there are instances with this. The two work together.
Okay.
All right. Well, there you go. I thought that was worth sharing, and so you can come to your own conclusions. We'll talk about it more, I'm sure, at the Hangout tonight. But now it's time for some laughs, brought to you by the gang over at ABC's Jimmy Kimmel Live last night.
I'm tired. I didn't get much sleep last night. I read all 64,000 pages of the JFK files last night. Turns out he was murdered. I would imagine that the conspiracy crowd is none too pleased today. I'm not sure we learned anything from these documents other than the names and social security numbers of government workers, many of whom are still alive and about to find out what it's like to have their identity stolen. But who cares, right? Trump said no redactions, so no redactions. These files appear to support the widely held belief that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. There's no evidence of a second gunman, which means Ted Cruz's father's off the hook. That's good. All Trump did really was make a big mess, really. These are basically the same files Biden released 2 years ago, but these were totally disorganized. Apparently, Trump surprised his people with this. National security officials had to pull an all-nighter after Dopey announced on Monday that he would release the files the next day. Suddenly, they had 24 hours to get it together, and they did get it. Great hustle, guys. And hey, now that we know how fast you are, let's see those Epstein files you promised. I'm not a betting man, but I would bet they'll take time to make redactions from those.
All right, there you go. Kimmel last night on ABC. And now it's time to get to today's guest, who we absolutely love. If you're not subscribed to his Substack, you should. It's now become a bestseller. Wajahat Ali is my friend. He's a former lawyer. He's a playwright. He's a contributor to the Daily Beast, former contributor to the New York Times. His TED Talk is one of the most viewed ever. You can follow him in all the social media platforms, including Blue Sky and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all of the rest. But you should watch his two shows now on YouTube, Democracy-ish with Danielle Moody, and he also now hosts a show on the Zeteo network called America Unhinged. And we always love when Waj joins us. Started a conversation with him admitting to something I did yesterday and wanted to figure out what he'd do, what you would do if you were me in this situation. Okay, thought experiment or moral experiment. You are pulling into a parking spot. You barely scuff the car next to you. You get out, you see you took off a little paint. White car, doesn't look great. It's a Tesla in front of the little restaurant you're going to go into in your town. What do you do?
Ooh, this is a very good thought experiment.
I will tell you what I did. This is a story about me today, and I thought, what do you do? Because you scuffed the car, you took off a little paint. It's a new Tesla. What do you do?
You know, it's a love tap. And as a friendly neighbor, you decided, you know what? I want to give you a little hug.
Yeah.
And I want to put a little bit of I want to give you and Elon some color in your life. So I'm going to take off a little bit of the white, leave you a little color. And maybe it wasn't me. Maybe it was another car. And so, you know, just to kind of play it little.
I think that's what most good people do. I think that it's weird that I scuffed the car and then I had this weird extra moral decision because it was a Tesla. And in these times, if it were any other model, you know, certainly if it was not like some high end model, because I don't probably if I have a chip on my shoulder about any car owner, it's like a Mercedes or something, you know. But
if it's not a Nazi model, let's just say, like, you know, several steps removed from Zig Heil's.
Well, anyway, I went in the restaurant and I asked all three parties there if it was their car, and it was this guy's car, and we exchanged information, and that's that. And I'm like, man, can I just give you, I think it's a little paint. It's just a little paint.
Was he, you know what, to be honest though, I'm like you. I suffer from that Jiminy Cricket voice in my head. I do the same thing. I'm like, cause it depends. Like sometimes you can't tell. So this happened to me, like where I did a slight.
You could tell.
Oh, this one you could tell. So like, all right. So then you go in and you're like, you clean your conscience and you do it. I would have done that too, I guess. But it still would have. Was he a douchebag or no?
Not really. He was old.
Yeah. See, so maybe he'll be like, yeah, there was a man. Oh yeah, that's bad. Yeah, I'd do that. Then I would. I see it.
It all wiped off. Most of it wiped off. But I showed Waj the picture, but there's a good mark that I took.
Yeah, it's a good mark. See, that's a good mark. I would have done that. But you want to keep your conscience clean, right? So then
it's like you're religious. Like you pray. Like you believe in something higher than you. But I feel like I'm similar. I feel like for similar reasons is why I try to do the right thing. People call me a goody two shoes. My own daughter's like, you're such a goody two shoes. I'm like, I don't know. I try to do the right thing. It doesn't mean I always do, for sure.
But we need more goody two shoes, right? I think we need more people with conscience. We need more people with, I don't know, some shame, some level of like awareness. Having seen that, that's a little chip. That's a chip. I'd go there. And plus it's an elder, he probably, can you imagine he comes out, he goes, who did you kids? You whipper. It was the woke. It was one of those blacks. And then maybe you just made him more racist. And then he like blames like the Venezuelans or something, or the Muslims, or a pro-Palestinian activist. You're like, no, just me, a fellow white. It was a mistake.
I mean,
and he'll be like, fellow white. I've done that before too. Thank you. Look at that. There was a man who could have left, but he came inside and he told me. Maybe he warmed his heart.
I don't think so, but perhaps. And when it happened, I did look around for a non-white to blame it on.
You're like, where's Waj when I need him? Damn it. That would have been awesome. You know what you should have done?
Actually carry around a picture of you.
You know what you should have done? You should have reversed the car, parked it somewhere else, then run in, say, hey, does anyone have a white Tesla? I just saw brown. Scrape it and leave. They're like, what? Like, let's go get him. And they're like, did you take a photo? I couldn't. I was too busy chasing him. That's what you would have. That's the new America, Pete. Come on. You're of the old America. What happened to you?
I'm like Reacher.
I know. Yeah. You should be like Reacher. Like, I'll get him. He goes, I've been training for UFC. I could sweep the leg.
Well, the one thing I was urged is that he struck me and then he gave me his name, and I'm pretty sure he was an older Jewish man. And here's my problem with him. He goes, well, it is a new car. And I'm like, new? Like, then you should know better. If it's new, was it pre or post the Segall, sir?
Yeah. Did you ask him how new is it?
How new is it? Does it come with a salute, a Roman salute that just comes out of it, the hood of it, or is it one of the older models?
So in all seriousness, though, if it is a new car and if he just bought it, and he bought it, I don't know, oblivious to everything or not oblivious, then you kind of actually helped him. And let me tell you why. Because that accidental, unintentional love tap, small scrape, you'll get it fixed for like $100, probably $200. Anyone who's driving a white Tesla for the next year in America, unfortunately, you're driving a Target. Okay,
it's a canvas.
Yeah, it's a canvas for us. By us, I mean the majority, to, if you will, exercise our anger and frustration against the Nazi.
Well, let me ask you about that, because, by the way, now you've got me really worried, because now this poor old guy, Tesla's like proprietary. Everything you got to fix, you got to go to Tesla. I feel like I hope you could just go to any body shop or a child with a paintbrush. I could have fixed it myself if I had some paint. I'm pretty sure doesn't take a master's degree in car body work, but he's going to go to a Tesla dealer because it's the only place you can go, and there's going to be vandals there, and they're going to injure the poor old man. And it's going to be my fault.
I mean, probably not. First of all, he bought a Tesla and it's new. It's like, what are you doing, bro? But just because you're buying a new Tesla doesn't mean you are inviting yourself to be the subject of vandalism or assault. And we're anti-assault and anti-vandalism. But if you buy a Tesla in this day and age, you know what you're signing up for. I believe, and we don't know anything about this man, but suppose right now, Pete, someone says, I'm going to buy a Tesla because Donald Trump told me to buy a Tesla, and Sean Hannity told me to buy a Tesla, and Elon Musk is a patriot, and he brought astronauts home, and he's saving us from waste and fraud, and he's making us great again. All right. That's like, you know what you sign up for. You walked in that Tesla dealership, you know people are protesting it, like, then, F around and find out. And by F around and find out, again, I'm not saying that means you are a willing victim of assault or vandalism, but people will be upset at you, and people might think you're a D-bag. That's what I'm talking about.
Elon Musk was on Fox News last night, I think, with Sean Hannity, and he was complaining about what is happening at many different Tesla stores. I wonder how many it is that have been protested, or how many have been
It's
attacked.
international, man.
Yeah.
Even in Trump counties.
He gave this woe is me interview last night to Sean Hannity. He said the attacks against him and his company have been a shock to him. He blamed Democrats for the violence. And what do you make of his complaints that people don't like him and that people are reacting this way?
I did 2 tweets, one quote tweet of that clip, and all I said was, apartheid boy is sad. And for whatever reason, that kind of took off. And then another post I did on Blue Sky, where I said the following, MAGA demands civility despite giving us cruelty. MAGA wants respect despite mocking us. MAGA wants safe spaces for themselves, but no safe spaces for us. But the rest of us, we don't play by those rules, right? Relationships require reciprocity. And now MAGA is finding out. And this is my response to MAGA, because it's not just Elon Musk. That mindset also belongs to Donald Trump, right? We get to mock you, ridicule you, stomp our boot on your neck. We expect you to lick our boot, say, yes, master. And we expect you to behave like Marco Rubio and Lindsey Graham and be a willing reek. You're supposed to say, yes, may I have another? And the majority of folks who aren't into S&M kinks, I'm not judging, but they're like, no, we want our relationships to be reciprocal. You treat me with respect, I'll treat you with respect. You give me civility, I'll give you civility. But if you are literally firing me, destroying my agency, going after Social Security and calling it a Ponzi scheme, going after Medicaid, making America horrible again, and then saying that you're saving us from waste, but you're getting $38 billion of government subsidies, and you are platforming Nazis, and you're doing Zig Heils, and you're owning the libs, and you're celebrating my misery, right, as part of your MAGA agenda, and you're going after immigrants, and you're going after people here legally, then no, I'm not going to give you civility. Then no, I am going to mock you. Then no, I don't care about your stupid Tesla car and your Cybertruck that can't get of snow. And this is the F around find out moment, because authoritarians want you to submit, right? Authoritarians are notoriously fickle. I know you've interviewed many of these people. The authoritarians hate being mocked, which is why, if you've noticed, Pete, Tim Walz's weird hit, it really stuck with him. Like, when he called them weird, it really, really bothered them. Yeah. And the fact that they neutered Tim Walz is something unforgivable. We could talk about Democrats and their failure of leadership, but Tim Walz has been unleashed. I don't know if you've seen him in the past week. He's back to the Tim Walz that we knew and loved. They really, really dislike mockery. And the thing that Elon Musk is realizing is all his money, all his wealth, all his power will never get him love. And apparently when he came out with Dave Chappelle, I think it was last year in the Bay Area, if you recall, he was booed. And what people said is that he was inconsolable. He was sobbing. They had to potentially call 911 because they thought he would harm himself. That's the type of fragility of the bully, the authoritarian, which is why people like you, comedians, Mel Brooks, Chappelle when he was, not cavorting with Elon Musk, mockery and taking him down a notch through comedy is so effective because it reveals the weakness and fragility of these men who have all the power, but really at the end of the day are scared boys behaving like bullies. Sorry, you asked me a simple question. That was my little rant.
I remember your meltdown at the Aspen Ideas Festival when they didn't like you. It was really similar to what
the first half of the set they didn't like. They came. The funny thing is, the first half of the set, Jeffrey Goldberg later told me, I did this whole riff on being a moderate Muslim, and no one was laughing. I thought they were pretty good jokes, but then they got the second half, they started laughing, and then Jeffrey later said, "You were serious." Like, oh wow, this is a moderate Muslim. This is like a unicorn. But that was a weird set.
I joke. Everybody always loves you everywhere you go. And
no. That was a really weird set because people did not laugh. And then they only started laughing when Colin Jost and Michael Che came on. They actually laughed during your set a little bit. So you got some laughs. And I think the only other person who got laughs was Jost and Che. It was wasn't that the weirdest audience?
Oh, I mean, yeah. I think I did it like 3 times. There's a bunch of billionaires in the audience, and they're not exactly. My best jokes ever were like about credit default swaps. Let me get back to some of your latest writing at the lefthook.substack.com that just got some kind of accolade. What was it again? It was like one of the best Substacks in all of.
No. I got like more than 1,000 paid subscribers. And so once you get more than 1,000 paid subscribers, you become officially a bestseller. So they notified me and they said, hey, share this. It'll help you. I'm like, great. And I got more than 50,000 subscribers, which is nice. I mean, look, it's peanuts compared to everyone else, but I'm a one-man shop. I started like 9 months ago. I try to be somewhat prolific.
I mean, there's so many people trying to do this. So you have been far more successful than so many people. Don't look at it that way. Yes, there are people more successful than you, but you are far more successful than most people at this, which is a testament to your whole career. I think these Substacks and these, podcasts and all the things that you're doing are exactly where you probably, I don't think you did anything wrong. You come up in the mainstream media, people hear of you there, you get fired everywhere you go or not renewed because you speak out to truth to power, which actually ends up in the long run gaining you more of a serious support than you could ever have asked for. So I think you played it perfectly. And
that is actually a very astute summary of my career. I go to all these places, knock on wood, and people say the following. You should be more famous. How come you're not more famous? And I'm like, I'll take that as a compliment. And what happens is I start independent. I've always been grassroots, but then I have a foot in, like you said, mainstream. And then I go to these mainstream places and I'm myself. And I think I am a little too blunt for them, even though I'm always professional. And they don't review me.
I honestly will say what I think it is. And I hate to interrupt you, but I think it's very specific with you and with Ellie and with a handful of others. When you talk about white people, it makes most white people, including liberal progressives, it gives a bit of a twinge. There can be this insensitivity when you say this or that to make it seem like white people don't suffer. See, that doesn't land with me. And a lot of it is because of comedy, and a lot of it is because I know what you're doing, and you don't actually feel like white people don't suffer. A lot of it is you're trying to make a point, and a lot of the point is like, basically black folks saying to people of color, saying to us, does it hurt? Really? Hurts, huh? Like, imagine what it's like for us for time in memoriam, like forever. It's always that way. Feel the hurt. I don't think it works sometimes with some people, but I think that's the thing that corporate programming people have to grapple with. These brown people, Joy Reid, Waj, Ali, lots of others, say things in such a way that are insensitive to well-meaning white folks.
You're absolutely right. It's when we talk about white supremacy and we talk about the authoritarianism and we name a thing for what it is with the bluntness, it offends, as Ellie said, not the folks who are on, on 30 Rock, the people who are the editors or the producers. He said it always offends the corporate level, the 2 levels ahead, above. And that's true. I was thinking about this earlier today.
I disagree. I disagree. It affects the corporate people just as much because they care about what their bosses think.
So you think he says, no, they might agree with you, but he says the corporate doesn't agree with you.
No,
so you think they're all complicit in it.
There are a handful of people that it's true about, but with my experience and being in the room, I put myself in the room with all those corporate executives. And I think there's a lot of like not having really much of a principle because that's how you keep your job, period.
And I was thinking about this. I'll give you an example of the fragility. of these individuals are unwilling to really lean in and unwilling to investigate and be self-reflective like you are. A couple of years ago, I think it was 2019, Black Lives Matter. So an organization I won't name right now calls me and says, can you just help me out? And I said, how? He goes, we have a really wealthy, liberal, Democratic white donor in Boston who wants to talk about race relations, but he says he does not want any mention of Black Lives Matter because he finds it divisive and offensive. So how can we talk about it without even mentioning Black Lives Matter? And I'm like, you can't. And so throughout America, Pete, everyone wants to get to reconciliation without truth. Remember Rodney King? Can't we all just get along? We just want to fast forward. And I think people like me and Ellie and Joy, what we say is, yes, we want to get to reconciliation, but you can't get to reconciliation without truth. And for truth, you have to name a thing. You have to connect the dots. Well, and that's where we step on people's toes and people get really offended and they call us divisive and then they cancel us. And then voila, they say that we're the ones who are the race baiters and the race traitors.
Black Lives Matter is one of the greatest kind of names for a movement in the history of civil rights movements, but for Black people, because it showed for Black people their humanity to each other. And the aim was to say to everybody else, our lives matter. But the reaction to it, of course, was so do white lives, so do my lives, so do cops' lives.
It's always been this way throughout American history.
Right. But the thing is that the difference is Black Lives Matter is simply a continuation of the civil rights movement. And I think that Dr. King and others in that movement that were arguably more successful in convincing people used the more moderate language of civil rights and human rights versus a more honest and raw and specific phrase, Black Lives Matter. It's the same thing. They want the same things. The movement's demands were similar, unfortunately too similar because not enough change. But like the naming was so on point that they had to paint over it.
and look at the name. If you really think about it, let's just Black Lives Matter.
It's perfect.
No, Black Lives, it's not Black Lives are the best. Black lives are awesome. Black lives are better than white lives. They're like, hey, America, can we just agree? Like, Black Lives Matter. We're like dying. We're getting like choked out and killed by police. We can't even stay in our own home without police, like, unfortunately firing at us. We're dying everywhere. Can you just agree that Black Lives Matter? And then there was a white lash, and there were some white people said, no, we cannot even agree on Black Lives Matter. Even that is too offensive to our sensibilities.
I feel like you citing the violence misses the point of the larger problem. I mean, obviously that's the worst part of it, but the truth is it's not the widespread violence wherever it is widespread or whatever kind of violence it is and whoever it's coming from. It's the daily indignity and the marginalization of actual opportunity for employment, education, and healthcare. Like, that's what the civil rights movement, obviously first, the right to vote to get all of those things, but it really should be about that. And we should be most focused on it because that's what the vast majority of people of color are having to deal with. It's not necessarily daily police brutality. Of course, that's some people in certain areas, obviously, but most people are just dealing with having their opportunities limited. Meanwhile, my white daughters are probably now going to have a better opportunity. I was thinking about it. My daughter's applying to schools. Like, she will have less competition given the fact that there will be less thought given to your daughter, thankfully. I literally gave them your daughter's name.
No, it's very deliberate. They're like, listen, these are the two daughters that you need to say no to in favor of my two daughters. Look, it's always been this way. It's always been this way. Going back 10 years, at first everyone said it was economic anxiety, and all the research has shown that it was predominantly, not exclusively, cultural anxiety that drove Trump's voters. Now, what does that mean? They believed that they were losing out. And they felt that the darkies, me and my daughters, were taking their rightful spot. So the feeling was by giving the opportunities that you correctly mentioned, by finally having a woman there or one Black person, right? The example I give is this. Suppose there's a plaque that shows the names and the faces of the board members of a company. And for, the 1950s, it was 10 white guys. 1960s, 10 white guys. 70s, 10 white guys. 80s, 10 white guys. 90s, one white woman, 9 white guys. 2020, 2 women, 1 woman of color, an Asian guy, a Latino, 6 white guys. For the rest of us, Pete, we're like, wow, look at that. We finally made it. We finally got a seat at the table. Now, for the 6 white guys, and what really works and what Trump and Republicans have really played on with the Southern strategy since the Civil Rights Movement, like you mentioned, was they took your seats. I am being replaced. And so we will import white South Afrikaners, but we will get rid of innocent brown people with tattoos because they look scary. And we'll send them to El Salvador, and we'll pay the crypto bro dictator wannabe Bukele $6 million of our money to house them in some prison. And oh, lo and behold, they have no due process. And the Trump administration will ignore a judge. So now we're in a constitutional crisis. And even Steve Bannon now will admit, you know what? I think they picked up some gardeners. They might be swell guys, but oh well, too bad. And that's where we are. It's a continuation of everything that you said. It is white supremacy, white fragility, not all white people, because there are white people who are against white supremacy, and there are people of color who co-opt and are complicit in white supremacy. But that race divide has been used as a wedge by the 1% against the 99%. And as you know, black workers, brown workers, white workers, yellow workers, mixed workers, we're all in it now. We all need Social Security. The rich are going to take it away. We need Medicare. The rich are going to take it away. We need jobs. The rich are going to take it away. And they have us fighting against each other over trans, who are 1% of the population.
Yeah, it's working. It's working. And this
always
policy
works.
To deport the Venezuelans. I mean, even you, I guess I'm unsurprised because you've always defended terrorists. You're defending these Venezuelan terrorists is what they're called. And that's the reaction to anybody saying what you said. So you think these guys should have been able to stay in the country? These were bad guys, Waj. They were gang members and terrorists, most of them at least. So now you're going to make the argument that they should have been left here. And that's why they did it. That's why they did it, to set up this situation. And Timothy Snyder wrote about this is a strategy that Hitler and other fascists employed. You get rid of the worst people, and then you challenge people to defend them. Well, I guess that's what John Adams did, though. I saw that.
McCarthyism, right? Like you go after the lowest hanging fruit, the rotten fruit that people don't like. You say, I'm going after communists. Do you like communists? No. All right. So what's the problem? We're going after rapists and criminals. Oh, but by the way, we're going to import Andrew Tate and his brother from Romania. And we're going to pardon.
And Conor McGregor is the Irishman.
Conor McGregor, who was just held liable for rape. And they were also going to pardon the guy who created Silk Road, which was a digital hub for sex trafficking and drug trafficking. And we're also going to pardon 1,600 people, including those individuals who were held guilty of seditious conspiracy. But we're really for law and order, and we're against the rape and sex trafficking. And oh, by the way, we're going to cast a wide net. And yeah, sure, some of these people were probably innocent, but now they're in Salvador. And sure, this Palestinian activist, now the White House admits openly, has no criminal charges, but whatever. He's detained now, even though he's a green card holder. And there was a guy who was just walking along in Chicago who's like, I don't know if you saw this 2 days ago. Dude who was walking in Chicago, citizen, got picked up by ICE, detained for 10 hours, confiscated his wallet, kept away his ID, and then 10 hours later, they're like, our bad. And that's why people should care, folks. That's why you should care. It's a slippery slope. Like you mentioned, Hitler did it. It happened in America. It never ends. As with that famous Niemöller quote, right? First they came for, and then they came for.
Yeah.
And this is where we are.
Yep. Absolutely. Well said. Where are we? Are we in a fascist dictatorship? What are you calling it today?
No. I think we are. I think we're in an authoritarian regime right now, and I think you have to have your eyes wide open. And the past week, I think, is when it got supercharged. And specifically, this case about both with the Palestinian activists in Colombia and also these alleged Venezuelan gang members. And now we know for a fact several of them are literally not. They were just picked up because they were brown and had tattoos.
It seemed like this week, those events.
He defied the judge order. Not only did he defy the judicial order, he's trying to get the judge impeached. He doesn't care that he deported a 10-year-old brain cancer survivor who's a citizen. He's openly saying that he wants to undo birthright citizenship. He can't, but he's testing it. And he's unilaterally now telling the judges, enforce it. What you going to do? I got all the power. What you going to do? No checks, no balances, folks. We're in it.
Well, at least he ended the wars in Ukraine and Gaza.
Oh yeah, there. At least that. And even that, no. Because Gaza, as of right now, humanitarian crisis, Israel killed at least 400 people, nonstop bombardment, and now took over a Gaza corridor like we said they would. So that's occupation. And then that Putin fella, very reliable. Do you trust him, Pete?
He is, if you knew anything about him, you would know he is one of the worst living human beings and has been for as long as he's been operational. He does all the worst things to people, and he's the most corrupt. It's hard to believe anybody can look at that guy and not feel it's seeing Rubio, who was one of the biggest Russia hawks, completely just be prostrate, melting into the couch. Before I let you go, I just want to ask you, I really like this over at your Substack, the lefthook.substack.com. If you're not subscribed, I would say you're a fascist. That's what I would say. And you don't
I would not say that. I would say welcome.
I would say you don't like animals. And
I would say you punch babies in the face.
You're a baby puncher. Well, probably the people who don't subscribe, I would say their baby will get punched. The baby closest to them should get punched if they don't subscribe to Left Hook.
Well, let's use a Trumpian logic. Prove to me that you don't like punching babies by subscribing to Left Hook.
That's how it should be sold. America's entered the sequel to the Civil War. You interviewed this guy, Michael Vorenberg, and it's real fascinating. People can go listen to it, watch it at your Substack. Just say a bit about that conversation, and I thought
that was a very sober conversation. Michael Vorenberg is a professor of history at Brown, expert on Reconstruction and slavery, and he has this new book called I think the Lincoln's Peace or the Lincoln's End, something like that. And basically, he gets this new material where he argues that the Civil War didn't end at Appomattox. It quote unquote ends, he says, definitively, but much later, it still exists within memory and violence. And, I asked him, so do you think we're in the second Civil War? And he said, no, I think we're in the sequel to this Civil War. And his exact words, I think we're in a cold Civil War, where many of those, he gave a tit for tat. It was remarkable. He goes, even then, during the Civil War, some people who were part of the Confederates, they lived in a separate reality with a separate grasp on facts. Up was down, left was right. They felt aggrieved. And we're in the similar situation where it's much worse because we have more guns. We have social media. We have now COVID, bird flu. It's international. It's more global. So he says he believes we're entering a period of a cold Civil War in America. The one hope that I had, as I mentioned this, he goes, I think that's a very good observation, is I said I lived through the War on Terror. And I remember, Pete, and you remember 2001, 2002, 2003, this country lost its mind. And the neocons were on top. And Bush won in 2004. I knew he would. But you remember around 2006 what happened?
The war in Iraq was spinning out of control, and he lost the House, I believe.
The war in Iraq was spinning out of control. The worst economic recession of our lifetime. The crisis in Louisiana, Hurricane Katrina.
That's right.
Lies were being exposed. Soldiers were coming home in body bags. The rise of ISIS and extremist groups. And then this country's like, you know what? Let's give a shot to this black Muslim. So he's not Muslim, folks, Barack Obama. So I'm hoping that there is an opportunity. But the sad part is, Pete, look, I'll say this. We learned the hard way. We learned through pain. And, Hitler said Hitler said that Reich would last for a millennia. He said, this is going to be a 1,000-year Reich. It only lasted 13 years. But how many people died and suffered, Pete? How many people died and suffered?
Right. It's a good question. And history is really important to reference now. Appreciate you, as always, my friend, for joining me. Thank you very, very much. And folks, go subscribe or a baby will be punched. All right, there you go. Wajahat Ali. How about it? Go subscribe to the YouTube shows and his Substack right now. Get his book. I think I forgot to mention that earlier. I hope to see you at tonight's Hangout, and I'm very excited to be debuting John Carroll's cuts from his new album here at the end of the show every day that I can remember. See, I forgot to plug it at the very beginning. It's called Can't Afford Not To, is John's new album. You get it at johncarroll.org. This song is called On His Bike, and now I'm going to throw to John to say a little bit about it before we play it.
Thanks, Pete. Great show. Hey, springtime is pretty much here. Time to get out there in the rarefied air, get up into the woods, get out onto the blacktop sometime, get onto a bicycle. This tune is called On His Bike. It's just a fun, freewheeling, scene-stealing, good-feeling groove about the joys of two-wheeling. Hope you all have a great time out there. If you like to get a little crazy like I do, wear your helmet.
That's all aglow, yeah. He's a happy youngster, and he's pumping his way home. Bound to sit down with his family, once more he'll be gone. On his bike, on his bike. First thing in the morning was the last thing at night. On his bike, rolling by the river, pedaling, pedaling, glide, ripping through the wood, yeah, pedaling, pedaling, glide, skid marks in the school yard, pedaling, pedaling, glide, don't a wheelie feel so good. He can stand up on the pedal, grab the handlebars until he's gonna ride right into paradise, gonna glide on down that hill. On his bike, hey, on his bike. First thing in the morning was the last thing at night. On his bike, he's on his bike. Yeah, you like to ride with his high tops on. On his bike. On his bike. Check this day. He's a super trooper with the youngsters of his own. Pulls into a rest stop, call them on the phone. He's on a 14, 15, 16 Harley seat. He's thumping his way home. He's gonna get down with the family, and once more he'll be gone. On his bike. He's on his bike. First thing in the morning was the last thing at night. On his bike. He's on his bike. Yeah, he likes to ride with his high beams on. High beams on.